Hello and welcome to the North Metro SBDC programming.
Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar with Dora covering the ECE staff recruitment and retention. And I'm going to let her take over.
Awesome. Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about early childhood staff recruitment and retention. Because we are a smaller group, please do put any questions you have in the chat. And then there's also time for questions at the end as well. The slides are pretty text heavy, but you will get a copy of the presentation. So don't feel like you need to write a ton of notes because you will have some pretty lengthy slides that you can refer to as well. Cool. So recruiting and retaining staff in early childhood education is currently one of the biggest struggles that we're having in this industry. As of 2026, the data is that there are 53% of program leaders cite staffing as their primary concern, with national turnover rates in childcare reaching as high as 33 to 47%. And that turnover costs a lot of money because then you have teachers leaving. It harms the relationships that children have with their primary caregivers, which we know can be very disruptive to their behavior. And then it also just costs you as a business owner a lot of money because then you have to train a new person and go through all the background checks and go through all the fingerprinting. So it's a pretty time-intensive issue that providers are having in their programs, and that's why we need to talk about recruitment and retention. So, staff recruitment. A lot of people, because of the high turnover rates, are just trying to find a warm body. They just want somebody that can get licensed, that can be in the classroom, that is trained, that's taken trainings, that can pass the background check, but they're not always looking for the best fit. And we've found that, one bad hire can really change the entire culture of your program. And that's why it's so important to really make sure you have somebody that's a good fit. Because you might bring somebody in that is toxic to that culture that you have, or gossips all the time, or is always late, or is not dependable, or is just kind of mean and angry. And that can really impact your culture. So it's important to really find the best fit. And when you do that, then you'll have better long-term success and less turnover. And you're really making sure you're finding the right people instead of just a person. So with that in mind, different places you can look. You can look at people who have experience with younger siblings, babysitting, summer camps, rec centers, anywhere where people are interacting with children and they enjoy it. Libraries, museums, zoos. There's a lot of indoor jumping places, trampoline places, urban air type places. All those places are really centered around children. So you might be able to find somebody that works in one of those arenas that would also enjoy working with children as well. The primary place to post jobs currently is Healthy Child Care Colorado, and that is really the primary job searching website right now. You can also post on Nextdoor to look for different people also, and they are generally localized in your area. So Nextdoor is a website that is kind of around your neighborhood. So it's a lot of I saw a fox today, and this car has been sitting outside forever. But along with that, you can also find individuals that are local to your area that do babysitting or might have a family childcare home, and you can kind of match up with that. So you can definitely look at that. And then also parent groups or people that have experience or a passion for young children. There's a fair amount of people in early childhood that have their own young child, and that's part of the appeal to them in working in early childhood because they can work with their child or watch their child during the day while they're also making money. So that is a big incentive for some of those younger families. You can also provide a recruitment bonus for families and staff if they refer somebody and that person stays with your program. This is a pretty common practice if a family might know somebody who was a nanny and they're looking for more of a full-time job with benefits, or they know somebody who, did elder care, but they want to get into young children and they want, a foot in the door. Those things can be really helpful, and having those recruitment bonuses is pretty common and also fairly effective. So different considerations for recruitment. Traditional job postings aren't really sufficient right now, and you really want to focus on speed, accessibility, and a clear pathway to get that person onboarded into your program. The speed is really coming from a place where a lot of candidates are applying to multiple centers and multiple programs, or they might decide to start their own program through their house or through a different method if they want to. So you really want to make sure that you're responsive and that you're staying in communication with your applicants. We've heard a lot of stuff about ghosting, centers not getting back to applicants, applicants just kind of vanishing. It's really kind of rough both ways. So you really want to make sure that you're being responsive. Hey, I know you interviewed on Monday, today's Thursday. I know I haven't gotten back to you, but this is what we're doing. We send in your background check. We should get an answer by next Tuesday. Like really just making sure you're in contact because otherwise you can lose really good people. You can also look beyond traditional applicants. So people that are, again, working in something with children, hospitality. There's a fair amount of nurses that kind of get burned out that seem to go more towards ECE. So anything that's kind of a connective, human-based business, those people also can generally get into early childhood pretty well. I think the most creative hire I've heard was there's like a dinosaur show, like a dinosaur puppet show that comes into town. And I had a director that was attending, this play through this puppet show and ended up hiring one of the puppeteers because he loved kids. He was good. He could tell stories. And that's like one of their best teachers. So just kind of keep your eye out for different opportunities to recruit for your program. There's also grow your own program. So you can hire a high school student that might just, need a year or two to figure out what they really want to do. Parents in the center that really want to support watching their own child while they're there working. There's the CDA, which is kind of a professional development pathway. There's a lot of different pathways that you can look at. So really think about, getting creative with how you're doing things. Don't just hire for the role, hire for a career. There is a salary scale model where you can really show like if you get, lead teacher qualified, you get this much money. If you're an assistant director, you can get this much money. If you're a director, you get this much money. So really showing that like career pathway in early childhood is very important because a lot of people just kind of think of teachers and they don't necessarily consider early childhood as like a professional career throughout a lifetime. So being able to show that this pathway really does lead somewhere can be very important as well. Interviewing wisely is also very important. Again, it's really about finding that good fit, not just kind of rotating through people. So you want to make sure that you're finding a good fit for your program so that you don't have that constant churning and turnover. Asking what their values are. People should know what their values are if you ask them in an interview, whether that's fun, transparency, accountability. There's all kinds of values, but people should know that. And if the answer to that will give you a lot of insight into how they work and how they operate. There's also situational interviewing questions, and that usually works a lot better than, do you like working with children? Yes. Okay, well, that's not super helpful. So if you can think of situational questions, especially that are specific to your program, that's very helpful. So if you're a nature-based program, you might want to say, tell me about a nature-based activity you did with a 3-year-old and how did it go? But getting really specific to see what their experience is and what their knowledge is also very helpful. There's some examples on here. Tell me about a time when a child was really testing your patience and how did you handle it? This is kind of like those, tell me a time when something went wrong. Tell me a time when something went well. Except these are very specific situations to early childhood that will tell you and give you some insight on how and what kind of fit they might be. Tell me about a time where you disagreed with a coworker and how did you handle it? Tell me about a time where you had to tell a parent bad news about their child's behavior and what did you say? So that's really trying to see how they're able to problem solve, how they communicate with parents, what their patience level is with children. It might be that maybe they'll tell you, the classroom is really loud and everything is really crazy and I just got really frazzled. That will tell you like how their environment is impacting the patients they have and how they work with children. And then also another important piece is having them try out in the classroom and really observing their interactions. It doesn't have to be used specifically, but if you put them in a classroom with another teacher, have that other teacher give you feedback on how they went. Because we know that staff like to be involved in hiring decisions or at least be asked for their feedback. They don't have the ultimate decision making, but they do like to feel like their input is valued, especially if that's a potential coworker for them. So do keep that in mind when you're kind of doing that interview process and really listen to how that co-teacher thinks about their interacting with children, how they talk to parents, those kinds of things. If they jumped in and really helped, if they seemed kind of timid and hung back, that will tell you a lot about how they are going to be as workers. This is just kind of like a fun little scenario question. So one of the key things that we have found is because of the high amount of turnover, programs don't really take the time to onboard and be a good environment as much as they should because they're so used to like, this is a new person, this is the old person, this person left, this person got here, this person's starting on Tuesday. Like it's so churny that the effort to really make it a welcoming environment isn't always there. So in this scenario, you've been invited to a dinner party by a friend who also invited 12 other friends. In scenario 1, you arrive and she shows you the wine, cheese platters, and says, mingle and have fun. And then she just walks away. Scenario 2, you arrive and she introduces you to the other guests, and then while doing so, she introduces each person and tells you what they have in common with each other in order to break the ice. So, oh, Dora, this is Raul. He also knows some stuff about business and he worked for the SBDC too. And this is Sarah, and she has a 2-year-old. Like, really kind of going through and doing that more substantial reading. And so it's just kind of a reflection on how are you having people start? How are you introducing people? How are you facilitating those connections so that they're able to kind of fit in and feel welcomed? Because I've honestly seen so many directors that are like, here's the toddler classroom. Okay, we'll see you at lunchtime and we'll do paperwork. And that's it. So really think about, like, how are you getting people into your program? What does that culture feel like for them? How are they feeling welcomed? And then how are you supporting them? Because it is a lot just to be thrown in a classroom. And because the need for staffing is so high, it's not as intentional as it probably needs to be. So just something for you guys to consider. So retention. Retention is really about a single factor like pay. People say it's pay. Everybody wants to get paid more. It's just a given thing. There's nobody out here like, and the pay is amazing. That's just not a thing. So everybody wants to get paid more, yes. But there are other different benefits you can give to really increase your retention. And so that's kind of what we've started focusing on. If you can give increases, that's great. But beyond that, like, what are the other things that you can do, such as professional respect and work-life balance, work-life quality, those types of things. In 2026, educators are increasingly leaving the field because salaries haven't kept pace with the 29% increase in childcare costs and overall inflation. Because inflation's increased so much since 2020, it's been really difficult for childcare providers to keep up the staff pay because they can't charge parents 30% more. Like, you can't kind of balance those two things, and that's really where we're having some of this like pay disparity and where some of these pay issues are coming into play. So it's caused a lot of providers to get really creative with the benefits that they do offer. You can do childcare subsidies. And again, that's a big attractant to people to work in early childhood. If you have a 6-month-old that is driving you bonkers at home, but you want to be with them, but you also need to make some money, like, early childhood is a great platform to be able to go work for 4 or 5 years, be with your child, help other children, do art, do science, all that other stuff. So that benefit is very like highly prized in this industry, and there's a lot of people that end up here because of that. But also on the other side of that, a lot of people do leave early childhood once their children age out, just because then they want to go do something else. There's also retention bonuses, and those are small periodic longevity bonuses. So that could be every 6 months, that could be, every quarter you get some amount of a bonus. When you're paying more in a salary, it costs you more because it's an ongoing expense. But if you can budget for just bonuses, then at least it's an amount, you know what it'll be. And it's not an ongoing expense, it's just something you can budget. So in quarter 1 in March, I know I'm going to give everybody $500. That's a lot easier to do than increasing everybody's pay across the board. And that's a much more expensive way to do it. That is not always sustainable. In addition to that, there's always the staff lounge, trying to make the environment in your program pretty, having an area for people to just kind of sit and be calm. There's like other creative things you could do. There's like a whole training just on that. But this is the reason why it's important to be creative with how you retain your staff and why it's so important to do that, especially because of the financial stability that's lacking in this industry right now. Other things you can consider are professional growth and culture. This kind of goes along with that professional respect. Paid professional development. 62% of teachers cite time as the biggest barrier to training. It's hard to have them in a classroom all day and then try to pay them to do a training at night or pay them to do trainings on the weekends. That part can get really rough. So it really helps if you can do professional development during the workday instead of after hours. I know a lot of programs close like one Friday a month or something, and they use that as their professional development day and have speakers come in and do PDIS trainings and things like that. You can also consider a mentorship model, which is basically like every new person is kind of buddied with a more veteran teacher. And then you have somebody to ask and say, I don't know where to put my lunch in this refrigerator. And I don't know why this child's biting, but it's driving me bonkers. How do we fix that? Like, you've really kind of got a buddy system so that those newer teachers have somebody to ask those questions to. And as an owner and director, it gives you more time to not have to answer all those questions yourself and to really be able to make that mentor teacher feel special too. It gives them a good sense of value to say, I'm so good at this. I'm a mentor teacher and I help all the new staff get settled and answer questions and things like that. So this mentorship model found that it's reduced isolation and burnout to 43% of the early childhood staff that report experiencing burnout. So it really does reduce burnout by almost half just by having like that mentor-mentee relationship. Operational support, so using automated software for attendance, incident reporting, parent communication, that's just something primarily directors are using and also administrators. So if you do hire an office support person, having that technology to really help them is very helpful because otherwise it's just a lot of stuff by hand and it gets very tedious. So making sure that you're letting people train on these and thinking about some additional professional development is very important. This I just think is interesting. So I don't know how many people have taken psychology, but there's kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of like what people need in order to really reach their goals and grow. And if you think about this from a work perspective, that physiological need is just you need to get paid. You need the money, you need to get paid. That is like the base need that you have. You have to make money. That's why you have a job. The safety needs in a work environment are really more based around, are you going to get fired tomorrow? Are you going to make sure you get paid? Does whoever you work for have the money to pay you? That security and safety within that professional context and in your employment, that is kind of the next level of this. Then you have the belonging and love needs. So in the work environment, that's really, do my coworkers like me? Do we get along? Do we have a good sense of teamwork? Can I rely on my boss and my coworkers to support me if something happens in my personal life or to support me if I break an arm and need some help or something? But that belongingness and team piece is really important. And in early childhood, there is like some gossip, some cattiness. It's a lot of people just being together all the time. And when you have that kind of toxicity, that's really where that breaks down like that level of belongingness, and that can be very detrimental to your retention. So it's important to really be facilitating that teamwork piece. The esteem part of this is really feeling confident and professional in what you know and how you are in the classroom. Understanding that it's not just watching children, but really helping brains grow, how you're facilitating that through art, through science, through language, all those kind of things. That esteem piece is really how good you feel about how your teaching skills are. And that's where that professional development comes in of really helping that person grow. And then the self-fulfillment part is really just, if you have all the things below, then you can really focus on continuing to grow. I don't need any professional development, but I would love to learn more about being a coach or how to get with children with special needs and grow in that area. So that's really once you reach the peak of that you can reach out. But I think a lot of people don't ever think about this pyramid in terms of work and the work environment. And it's actually really important because when you have all of this, that's what will help you with your retention. So just kind of wanted to share that. Being a leader. This is just a result of how much activity there is in an early childhood program all day. Because if you don't take the time to really think about your business and how you're leading people and how you're coming off to people and your relationships with people, then you end up really being more of a manager, boss person. And in early childhood, there's a lot of people that are very relationship based. I can't just be like, Raul, go take the kids outside. They need to go outside. They haven't been outside all day. Okay. Well, I can't do that in a way that when he's getting that interaction so abruptly and it is more of like a manager boss position, that really eats away eventually at just being bossed around and told what to do all day, and it can really decrease your value. So in early childhood, we really do try to push for like that leadership, relationship based approach of like, okay, everybody, let's all get the rating and get a level 5. Let's all work on, how we communicate with parents. Let's all work on transparency around the fundraiser that we do. Whatever that is, but it's really more of that leadership growth piece. And I think that's one of the really important parts of retention. If people work for someone they really like, they're willing to get paid less. I think we've all had jobs where we probably didn't make as much money as we wanted to, but we worked for or with people, or both, hopefully, that we really liked and we stayed. But when you're a boss and you're just bossy and managerial in this industry, it doesn't go very well. So some of the main characteristics we've seen of successful leadership in early childhood is integrity. And we know that that's one of the primary characteristics people see in their supervisors that makes them want to leave. If you are or have somebody that is, the owner director position and they don't say and do what they say they're going to say and do, or their words and actions aren't matching, that is the number one reason that people will leave a position. Like that boss they don't like, that's the characteristic they don't have. They're not doing the right thing. They're not doing what's best for their staff. They're just kind of, running around and not being very intentional. Open, honest communication, always very important. That connection with staff and really making your staff feel cared for, that piece is so important. Again, people will stay even if you can't pay them a bunch more because you care about them, because you can let them come in late if they need to get their oil changed, or if their child's sick, you can figure out a way to let them leave. But really caring and connecting with your staff is absolutely vital to retention. And when people feel cared about, they'll stay or they'll at least try to work it out with you. Encouraging that personal and professional growth, we talked a fair amount about that. Having a positive attitude, which is impossible every day. And if you are coming in and you've just had a rough morning, that transparency to be able to say, man, I am so grumpy. My car didn't start this morning. And then Freddie wouldn't get up to go to school. And then I just ran around all crazy. I just need to take a minute so I can just take a breath. That's okay too. That humility of being able to just be a person in front of your employees and model that is very important. But generally having a positive attitude of, we're going to figure it out. It's going to be okay. Let me see what I can do. That piece is important. Teaching and not telling. So a lot of the coaching around children, not just telling people what to do, but giving them trainings and really supporting them in their learning. Because we know that people in early childhood really do like to learn. And we know that that continuous lifelong learning is just always going to happen. So the more you can teach people instead of telling them, the more they'll stay for that guidance. Setting clear goals and expectations, soliciting feedback and not getting defensive, and then also being open to new ideas. So if your staff is coming to you and is like, hey, I want to put a sandbox in the backyard, or I want to do water play over the summer, being open to some different ideas and different ways to do things is also very important as well. Okay, so here are some metrics of hiring and retention. These are just kind of for the quantitative numbers people, some ways that you can look at this. So 90-day turnover, how often are you having people turn over? Is it happening every 90 days? How many people in each 90 days are leaving? Because if that number is very high, that means there's something wrong, something's happening there. And if there's a high rate there, it's probably because you're not creating that welcoming environment that we kind of talked about with that dinner party. You could just be throwing people in and they don't know where anything is or what you expect, or they don't know what they're supposed to do, or they're not used to performance management things that you're doing, or anything like that. That turnover will really tell you what's happening with that. Professional development completion rate. So are they completing the trainings you're providing for them? Do they feel like they have a future? Are they invested in the PD opportunities that you give them? If you say, we're going to have a motivational speaker come in on our staff PD day and they're going to be great and they don't care about that, or they don't want to show up, or they're calling in, it shows you that they're not super invested, and that could also be an issue. And then just generally doing a staff well-being quiz. How is everybody feeling? How on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being not burned out at all and 10 being I'm not going to make it through the day, how burned out do you feel? Just those little pulse checks to really see how people are doing, so then you can adjust accordingly. But those things are kind of some metrics that you can look at to see what's working and what might not be working. Okay, and then this part is kind of just a checklist of best practices that you can use if you are looking at hiring. So really thinking about, is the job attractive? There are so many early childhood teacher positions and postings that all look the same. So if you're somebody just applying to all the positions, it's not, it's not as attractive to people because you're just the same post they've seen 50 times. So how can you really discuss, if you can't pay hourly, what are your soft benefits? You get free childcare, you have paid mental health days, you have no cost CDA training, you will, send people to conferences when you can. Anything like that that you can highlight in that job post will stand out against all the things that are the same. Define the unique value proposition. So why should they work for you instead of somebody else? And in that business essentials class, we talk a lot about marketing and really finding out what makes your program unique. And what makes your program unique to parents will also make your program unique to staff. Maybe somebody wants to work in a nature-based center. Maybe they really want to work in a family childcare home because they're tired of like how busy the centers are. Maybe they want to be in a caring, loving, nurturing environment instead of a program that might be super academic. Maybe they really want to be in an academic place and they don't want to do play-based sandbox stuff. I don't know. But what makes your center unique and special, it works both ways for parents and for your staff. A day in the life graphics. So you could just kind of do like a sample visual, especially when you're onboarding people. Like, this is what your day will look like. This is, especially if you're hiring for a floater that might be changing different classrooms often. These are the break times. This is kind of what this might look like. You know, we are understaffed, so you might have to change rooms every once in a while during the day. Like, that stuff's important for them to know. And then the best candidates are often hired within 5 days of their search. And so that kind of speaks to, again, being quick on things, because since there's so much turnover, it's just constantly churning. People apply for literally 50 jobs. They get one of those jobs, they start that job, they might keep it, they might not. Then they're churning again. Like, it's just a pool all the time. So the quicker you can snatch somebody up, especially if you think they're a good fit, the better off you'll be. Make sure that it can be mobile if you do have an application like that, or you can do just a Google sheet. That's fine too. Like, anything quick and easy so you can get the ball rolling is really helpful. And getting back to people, even if you're just calling people that apply to say, hey, we received your application, I'm setting up interviews for next Monday. Do that. Like, talk through it and make sure that you're communicating. Use action keywords, include terms like growth opportunities, mentorship, team culture, immediate opening. Anything that can really highlight your program again and get it to stand out is really helpful. There's not a lot of job postings that talk about like team culture, or here we value fun, or here we especially value play. Like, it seems like a given, but people really are looking for something that kind of stands out, and that tells them that you're putting some effort into those postings. And then we talked about, again, posting beyond just Indeed. Indeed is just a mess, honestly. I don't know. People that apply for jobs on Indeed, I've seen people get waitresses, I've seen people get nurses. I don't know what's going on, but like, Indeed just seems like a catch-all. So really try to focus on, you know, local community groups, next door, Facebook groups, anything like that. Because that can be much more helpful than Indeed. Indeed is just a lot of applications to try to sort through, and it can be very tedious. Interviewing and assessment. So here the goal is to assess the heart and the skill at the same time. Are they a good fit? Do they have values that fit into your program? And also, do they know what they're doing? Or do they at least have a passion for what they're doing? Are they accurately representing the skills that they have? Or are they just showing up like, yeah, I totally love kids, it's great? Like, we don't know. So just kind of check on that. You can do a speed dial screen, which is just kind of, you know, calls, letting them know when you're going to do an interview, see if they're an actual human, because apparently that's the thing now. We got to check, make sure that the people applying are actually human. Then that working interview, so having them be in the classroom, get feedback, you know, how do they talk to children? What are they doing in the classroom? Do they jump in? Do they kind of sit back? And then really think about, you know, how their language is with children, because we know that language with children is one of the primary indicators of quality. So are they talking to the child at their level? You know, what is the language they're using? Or are they just kind of standing up and talking down to the children, and you can tell they probably haven't been in a classroom before? Doing the offer and background checks, again, making sure that you're keeping that communication moving. You interviewed, you were in the classroom, the teacher you were in there with had great things to say about you. We'd like to move forward. We're going to do final offers on Tuesday, whatever. If there's somebody that is really great, you can definitely offer the job immediately after they've done the working interview. Again, the quicker you can make it move, the better. But we also know that there's a lot of background checks, fingerprinting, all that other kind of stuff. It's best practice to reimburse the costs of background checks and fingerprinting if you can. And if you have a like company card they can put that on to go get fingerprinted, that's even better. But putting that cost on somebody that you know is unemployed is kind of tacky and questionable. So if you have some way to help them get to pay for those things, that's really what's best. And then really thinking about that welcoming atmosphere. Hi, everybody. You can just send out a whole email to all your staff. Like, we have Sarah starting on Tuesday. She comes from this program. She has a lot of experience with toddlers. She's great at art or has a passion for whatever. Like, that kind of welcoming piece is really helpful. And you want to create that kind of environment to really make sure that you're keeping people. And then retention starts on day one. So really kind of that onboarding thing. Here's some different ideas. You can have a first day kit. You could give them a t-shirt. They could have a welcome snack or coffee. I've seen people set aside their lunch hour on the first day for the director to have lunch with them. Even if it's on site, like you just order Grubhub and be like, okay, now we're going to have lunch together because it's your first day. Tell me about yourself. What questions do you have? Let me tell you about myself. This is what we do here. But really trying to make that first day something special that they can remember instead of just, oh, warm body, you go over here now. 1 week check-in, scheduling a formal 15-minute sit down on Friday of the first week. What has surprised you? What do you need help with? What were you expecting? What were you not expecting? Is there any supports I can offer you? All that kind of thing. And then that mentorship. So if they are paired with that mentor, asking how that's going, asking if they need any additional support with that. And then pro tip, for if you have a candidate you love, check in with them every 48 hours via text until their first day. Really, like you have to continue that communication. Otherwise, they're just going to think that they're like lost in the abyss somewhere. And you really don't want that. I mean, people are expecting constant communication. And if you really follow through on that expectation right now, you'll get the people that you want to get. But if you just kind of do interviews or wait for like extended periods of time in between, people really need to be working. And so they can only wait so long. So just to be mindful of that kind of stuff. Do you guys have any questions?
So what do you think is the major cause of the turnovers for staff? Like, I know you mentioned a lot, and some part will be from hiring, and also some part will be from maybe how the whole package is structured. But what do you think? What's going on?
I think the primary two are the pay and not being able to keep people.
Okay.
Like because early childhood is just very busy, it's stressful. The parents can be stressed out. The children have a lot of behaviors. Like
Yeah.
it's just a lot for people. And you really have to have a good passion for children,
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it.
Okay.
Good question. Other questions? You guys can ask me whatever you want. Within reason.
Okay, so do you suggest, like professional opinion, do you suggest on like working in one before you open your own business to understand
Absolutely.
the business more?
Yes. Yes. Because I think, some people that might be looking to start a small business might be like, oh yeah, childcare makes a lot of money because people pay a lot of money for childcare. But they're not seeing the work that goes into that or a budget, especially if you can get like an administrative job in a program, because then you're really seeing the administrative piece. You don't have to have been a teacher yourself. As long as you're respectful, you don't have to be a teacher to be a director or to be like an administrator. But it's a lot of work, and it's important to understand how your enrollment impacts your budget and where the money goes that you guys are making, what the cost of doing business is. Because I do see people once in a while that just try to open up childcare and they think it's really easy and they don't understand like all the rules and regulations and all this other stuff. They're just like, people pay $2,000 a month to have infants in infant care, so they're making money. Like that's not always how that works.
Is there any licensing or anything that is required to have to become a child care provider?
Yes. There's a whole Colorado rules and regulations book. It's 200
Oh yeah.
pages.
And it changes monthly.
Yes. Mhm. Yes. It is very regulated, much like a restaurant or like, a healthcare nurse type of thing. Like there's just a lot of outside regulations. The public health department comes in to test how hot the water is.
Yeah.
You need a certain amount of square footage per child, certain amount of shade per child outside, a certain amount of textures on your playground. Like it's a lot of things. And so it's also really good to know all of that stuff before you just open a child care center. I mean, you won't get licensed until you read through all the licensing and you have a space that can get licensed. But sometimes by the time people do that, they're already losing money or there's a surprise to them. And you don't want that.
What about like education wise? Like the license makes perfect because you're dealing with kids and stuff. It needs to be it's a safety concern, but like
Mm-hmm.
like do you, like college wise or like education wise, do you have any
Yeah, so
certifications that you need to attain?
you have to be a certain level in the professional development information system. So in PDIS, you have to take a certain amount of trainings and have a certain amount of experience with children. I believe it's like 780 hours or something of experience with children to try to get director qualified. So there's a fair amount of work that goes into just getting director qualified.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just the owner and you're never gonna do anything, there are owners that like aren't qualified, from what my understanding, but like when, especially if you're doing an in-home care or you're doing a small business, like you'll need that director qualification, just because you will primarily be doing all of those things. So yeah, but you can do it. The nice thing about Colorado, from my point of view, is that the state offers a lot of these resources, so you don't necessarily have to do college or external trainings. You can do a lot of the internal trainings through the state, um, to get you to where you need to be, which is super nice.
Mhm.
And they count other degrees towards like your levels on PDIS, which is extremely helpful as well.
Thank you so much.
Any additional questions?
I have a question, Dora. I would say I have a great staff. Um, I have a really good staff. I'm super happy with all of my staff, but sometimes I run into pickles where like we get into like complacent moods or like lazy sureness and not really wanting to like, or they just want to go through the motions or do the bare minimum. And so that's really difficult because we value, the long term relationship that we built with them, but then we get to a point where I feel like some people kind of just hold on to hold on. How
Mhm.
do you give them that spark, or how do you re-promote like the reason that they joined this field, or how do you even navigate maybe saying maybe it's a time for a break?
Because they're burned out?
Yeah. Or they just get complacent. It's not even necessarily burnt out. We're pretty low. We're pretty low, but I think we've gotten used to running so low that like there's not necessarily a spark to do more or to go above and beyond with some of my employees. Not all of them, but I would just say a couple of them. Like because we have been so low or running at ratio, like it just seems like a day to day, and there's no um above and beyond or creativity or that sparkle in their eye that they used to have.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best way to fight complacency is with fun. Like if you started doing, this month we're going to do a creative art contest, and whatever classroom does the best creative art project as voted on by the other classrooms wins. Or, we're going to start an employee of the month thing based on creativity and innovation or something like that. Like try to get people do like to compete, and I think people specifically in early childhood are generally really like artistic and creative. So I think sometimes what they need is like a little push to like do something fun. I've seen people do like licensing scavenger hunts if they're getting complacent with licensing. Like, here's a checklist. Whoever can find the most licensing violations wins. And like you would do it on a PD day or something where you can kind of, put out a bottle of medicine over here and some soap that says keep out of reach of children over there. But something like that to kind of just think about how you can respark the fun in the job that they have. And usually a lot of that can be like competition based. And another thing is you could just ask. There's so many directors that sit around trying to figure out things like that. And sometimes the best plan is just to ask your staff. Like, hey guys, I really feel like we're getting kind of, settled in what we're doing. Let's have some fun. Like, what could we do to do some creative, fun art, science, whatever it may be. Like, how can we have a good time? Here's some ideas that I have. Like, we could do a competition, we could do a scavenger hunt, we could do, vote on the best spring art piece or vote on the best science activity that was done, whatever that is. But offer some suggestions and then see where they take it. Because if you can get their buy in on something like that, then they're more likely to participate instead of just telling them what you want them to do. Give them like some ideas and see where that goes. I'd be interested to see like how that works out. Because when you just ask people, they'll tell you what they want. I think a lot of people spend time trying to like figure that out for them. And for each person, it's also different. So I would try something like that and see if that like sparks anything.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No?
Could I just add a little bit on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you said, Dora, is ask is such a powerful thing, right? It's so easy for us to be like, well, this is what they're thinking and feeling. In addition to asking about like what would they like to do or see different or inject, also wondering, maybe you've done this, Jennifer, I don't know. Have you asked them like, hey, I noticed a little less enthusiasm. What's going on? So kind of trying to dig into, not pry into their life per se. There's a lot of things that influence people's energy, feeling, mood, etc. That has nothing to do with the industry or the job. They could just be having life stuff going on, mental health stuff going on. Maybe they take meds and they're not haven't had their meds available for whatever reason. There's a shortage, or they just haven't been able to follow through on an appointment with their doctor. I mean, there's so many things that could be kind of the problem. So yeah, asking, trying to get to the root of the issue as well is really helpful. And then I was a gym owner before, and one thing that we did is every so often we would bring in new blood. And even like if you really didn't need to hire somebody, I know sometimes it's not feasible, but if you have a little bit of extra funds, bringing somebody in, even just for a small part-time amount, and that new person kind of shakes things up. And it's not that you want your people to be afraid, but you want them to be thinking like, oh, well, this is not something I have 100% on lock. Like, I do need to step up and have a certain level of quality standard, right, that I'm meeting. And if somebody else is coming in and doing that, maybe I need to work a little harder here, right? I don't know what your schedules look like, but like in our gym, what we did, we flipped schedules quite a bit. So we learned that if somebody stayed in the same 5 a.m. class all the time, training a boot camp, well, one, like that's tough sleep wise for a lot of people, right? Lifestyle wise, but two, they got used to the same people. And so they were, so I don't know if like you can flip like classes, kids, and the different staff or things like that as well. But yeah, change, novelty, urgency, all these think of like human needs, human emotions of what motivates and triggers people, period. And ideally trying to like learn that from having conversations with them. Just a couple things to think about that.
Absolutely. Okay.
That's super helpful. Thank you. I'm sorry, my microphone wasn't working for a minute.
Fine. Okay, so it looks like we'll put the link to the childcare business essentials class in the chat. If this is something you guys want to talk more about, or you're thinking about opening up your own business, really either one of those two things, like this class has a lot of stuff in it that can really help you. So I would definitely recommend it to you guys if you haven't already taken it or if you want to take it again. There's a lot of stuff in there about like the financial pieces, marketing, how to do your own legal structure, all that kind of stuff. So if that's something that you haven't learned about yet, it's really helpful.
Yeah, just a real quick note on this program too. So I remember a lot of the things that Doris covered today, but also there was the last session last week that she went in deeper into like regulations, space limitations, and looking at finances, for example, that we're going to cover basic stuff, cash flow, balance sheet, budgeting, like really simple stuff where it's like, well, you just have your expenses and how much money you're bringing in, right? Like that's easy. Yeah, if you're X type of business, that you sell some stuff and you have a Shopify type of thing, cool. You got some very basic expenses and pretty simple, straightforward sales, right? But childcare, because of all the extra licensing, regulations, etc., there's so many more considerations that affect how you think about finances. Same for marketing. If you're in-home, how are you marketing yourself in a unique and different way that stands out, that says we're legit? Maybe some in-home providers struggle to get some clients because some kids and their families, because maybe parents have a certain vision of, oh, that's just a house, that's not very quality, that's not very professional. That's not the case. Like, what did you say, Dora? What was the hours you have to be licensed?
I think you have to have 780 hours of experience with children, like in the classroom.
That's a lot of time, right? Like, and that you put in before you're able to have this. So, okay, put that in your marketing. We licensed equals we have a lot of experience. And how do you communicate that? Not just saying it straight up sometimes, but how do you communicate that speaks to your demographic that's going to come to you? So you got to look at your area right around you, because people aren't going to drive 20, 30 miles to drop off their kid, most likely, right? They're going to go a few miles max. So you got to look at, okay, around my area, what are the parents that are going to come to my place actually look like? What do they sound like? Who do they talk to? What do they listen to? So you can start to think, okay, I got to speak this way. That's the marketing as well. You try to get it tighter down as an industry to really explain these concepts, right? That's the power of this program. I'm starting to where can I find the link? Oh, yes. Yeah, the learn more button there, click to learn more. That's the link. Also, one last note on that. So not just if you are an owner, director, is this powerful, but if you have any employees, it's really helpful for them to do this program side by side with you as well, because then you have one extra person or more that have some of this foundational knowledge that you can offload, outsource some of these parts of the business to as well, right? Ultimately, multiplying yourself is what entrepreneurship is about, leverage. And if you could do it all, you would need nobody else, but that's just not realistic. So if you have employees, have them sign up for this as well. That's why it's called for childcare administrators. It's open to all levels of a business. Yeah, any questions about that? Or for Dora? Dora's amazing, by the way. Thank you, Dora, for doing this time and time again for the childcare industry and specifically through SBDC with us.
Oh, yes.
Any other questions? Okay, great. If you don't have any questions,
Thank you, Dora. Yeah, appreciate
go
it.
ahead.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you don't have any questions right now, feel free to reach out. I'll send an email to y'all with this information, the recording as well, so you can look back at it if you'd like to. And definitely sign up for that program if you're thinking about it. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.